Hello everybody, how are you doing? I hope you're hearing me all right. I'm testing a new feature in OBS, which is compression on my microphone track to make this, so you can hear me when sometimes I go away from the microphone. I don't need that for the podcast, of course, because I'm doing that in post in my my mastering software, but I thought it might be a good thing for the stream, so please give me some feedback how that is working. Yeah, how are you doing? As I just mentioned, I'm gonna record a podcast now, and obviously not on Wednesday this time, but I got time today, so I'm doing it today. And after that, if everything goes according to plan, my camera is like really bright, and it wasn't that bright before, so I'm gonna adjust that now. If everything goes according to plan, I think it's a bit better. That sets the mood. Oh, it's because of the screen. I can actually, yeah, of course it is, because I didn't. My screen's very bright. I didn't adjust that like a pro with a bright screen. Yeah, that sets the mood a bit better. Yeah, if everything goes according to plan, after I've done the podcast and I've uploaded and everything, I want to try a new game that hit early access today, which is called Surviving the Abyss, which is about running an underwater station. And since I've written a novel about an underwater station, it's kind of my vibe, so I want to try that out. Anyway, let's cheers, by the way. Let's get into this podcasting business. I think I say let's do a little test recording like we always do. Hello, 1, 2, 3. This is a test. Oh, my stomach's chiming in like we always do. Hello, scratch my beard. This is a test. Interesting. Wait. I wanna see something. That actually no, it can't. Like, OBS isn't. That's an OBS filter, right? It shouldn't be. Why could I hear the beard scratching so much? It's making me paranoid. No, I think we're good. Actually, well, I can test that. I can test that. Testing. That. I can test that. Testing. Yeah, there's no compression on there. That shouldn't be on there. All right. Shall we start the show? Today we're going to talk about LastPass. Obviously, as it says in the title. It says so in the stream title as well, I think. So let us do that now. Let me see if I can actually do this. Here we go. You're listening to The Private Citizen, a civil liberty. I did that last week as well. I can't say civil liberties. Civil liberties. Take 2. You are listening to The Private Citizen. This is no, why, what, stop. All right. Don't tilt. Let's just keep going. You're listening to The Private Citizen, a civil liberties podcast. This is episode 141 for Tuesday, the 17th of January 2023. How LastPass made itself obsolete. Hello everybody, my name is Fab. I'm coming to you live from Düsseldorf in Germany. I'm your host. My full name is Fabian Alexander Scherschel, but just call me Fab. That's way easier, I think. And tonight, whatever time it is where you are right now when you're listening to this podcast, unless you're watching it live, although then it could also be another time. You know, I don't know what time zone you're in. Anyway, tonight on this Civil Liberties podcast, we are going to talk about IT security. Because I write about that a lot, and to be honest, it's kind of important. And it's important to be secure. And, I talk a lot about free speech and all this kind of stuff, but it's also very important to keep yourself secure. Because to be free, you kind of need to be secure as well. We need to kind of if you're gonna get hacked by the spies, that's not gonna be good. By the FBI or whoever, or just some guys who just encrypt your computer. That's also not something we want. So in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about LastPass. There was a big news about a security issue that happened and blew up kind of in the tech press just before Christmas, and I wanted to talk about that ever since, because I think it's an important topic. I think password managers are important to all of us. I think we should all use them, but I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But so I'm gonna dive into that. One of the reasons is for me is also not only this is obviously a topic close to my heart and something I feel is it's very important for everybody, but also it's been kind of, I mean, this is the theme lately. It's not been covered well in the press, and I'm including, the very specialized tech press here, including some people I used to work for, where it's likely just been, there's been blow-by-blow accounts and all these stories, some of them quite panicky. But like that, I haven't seen a lot useful stuff for just the normal private citizen, as it were. Maybe not a techie, or the just easy, simple takeaways. What happened? What you need to do now. I'm saying this, but of course, this probably will be another 1.5 2 hour episode. Well, this is not going to be short either, but I'm trying to just give you what I think is important, and also go into the details I think are important. Also, I got, of course, I have the luxury of because I took some time off over the holiday break, as I always do, and then I was kind of involved with the Twitter files and some other stuff. I'm a bit late to the party, so I have to I like doing that though. This is kind of my thing. So I have the luxury to look over everything and think about it a little bit, and hopefully present everything you need to know on this topic. Before we get into that, though, quick note here. I almost said hint, but that would be wrong. Quick note here. I'm like 95% sure there won't be an episode next week. I got some important stuff I need to take care of, which will probably prevent me from even recording an episode next week. And I don't think I can maybe get a second episode in before that, but I don't think I'll be able to pre-record and release one next week. So just so you know, yeah. And as usual, if you go to privatecitizen.press, there'll be the show notes for this episode, including all the links, all the quotes I give, and links to the live recordings. I say that even though I live record this on Twitch and then upload it to YouTube later. I haven't done that for the previous episode. I just haven't had time, but I'm probably just going to do these 2 in a row. So it'll be there at some point. But with that out of the way, let's get into the topic at hand here. So before I want to talk about LastPass and what happened there and why it's important and why everybody who used LastPass in the past or is using it now needs to know, I want to preempt that by just telling you why you need to use a password manager. And cheers, by the way. I'm having some lovely red wine here to go with this security debacle tonight. Yes, so before we get into all the trouble that happened, so if I just did that, right, if I just told you what was wrong at LastPass, you could get the impression that password managers are just not a good idea. But that's wrong. Yeah, I think everybody today in these times needs to use a password manager. That's just a fact of how our lives work. We do a lot of things online these days. We have a lot of digital accounts that are very important, that are essential to being, a citizen in a state and, having a bank account and all these kind of things. And those need to be secured. And just the effect of life is the effect of how the internet was built. The internet was kind of just randomly cobbled together, built on top of technologies, which means we're securing all of this now with passwords. That's just the way it is. Everybody says passwords are bad and we need to get away from passwords. I have some opinions on that, but I'm not going to go into that today. Suffice it to say that I think passwords are here to stay for a while and we need to secure them. And the way to do that is with the password manager. Now, most of these password managers, you can use some that are offline or that you to store the data yourself. But, generally, if you use a password manager, that will mean it will store the actual data, the passwords, in an encrypted fashion in the cloud, which is not bad. That is in itself, some people say that is stupid and you shouldn't do that. But I think that is completely fine, and we have developed technologies to do this safely. The rest of the show, I'm going to talk about how not to do this safely. But before I get into that, I want to just reassure everybody that there are technologies to do this safely. You can use password managers offline and kind of synchronize it manually. But if you're not an insane nerd, right, this is not something that you can do. I think you have to be completely insane to do that. You can. It's not insane in a bad way per se. It's probably it can be more secure, but let's just assume we're talking about normal people here. I've done offline password management in the past, but I'm also a bit of an insane nerd. So, let's talk about normal people here, normal private citizens off the street. So we need to kind of, we need to live with the fact that everything in IT security is always a trade-off between convenience and security. And you should never be too far on one side of the spectrum. You should never be you should never use technology that's too convenient, because that most of the time means it's very insecure. You also shouldn't use technology if you're a normal person, you can't use technology that's too secure, because there's no absolute security. The only absolute security in IT systems is like a system that's turned off, not connected to the internet, basically a brick that's very secure, but not very usable. So there's a trade-off. And, you have to be aware of there's always a trade-off. And so with password managers, we have to make a concession to it being convenient, because otherwise people will not use it. And I could include myself in that regard. And because it's safer to use a password manager than not to use it, we need to make some concessions for convenience. Basically, what you need to do is oh my God, I use that word too much anyway, but that was horrible. What you need to do is you need to think about what you're defending against and who you are defending against with your setup. And you also need to understand what password managers don't do and what they never defend against. And one of these things is local attacks. So a lot of people have this misconception that a password manager should defend yourself against local attacks, and protect against that. Whether it be running on your desktop or your phone or whatever. And that is just simply not what a password manager does. When an attacker is already in your system, all bets are off. It goes for phone as much as for a desktop, because it doesn't really matter at that point what the password manager does. If they're in your operating system, they can do key logging. Basically, they can see what you're typing on your keyboard or entering in your phone. And then, I talked about this in a previous episode on client side. Oh God, now I have to look this up. Luckily, the show notes have like these tags at the top, right? That's the security tag. So it was at some point under security. So I can just do some research here. Private Citizen Press. In my own episodes, except now my local server I'm running the show notes on is just misbehaving. So that's not good. What episode was that? That was pretty early on, I guess. Let me just look a bit more. Maybe I went past it. I remember, what was it? Site. I don't want to say something wrong. So, what was that episode? No, not that. Damn! No, I can't find the episode I'm thinking of. It's gotta be there somewhere, because I remember talking about this. I think this is a point where we need to edit. We actually have to do some editing here. What was that fucking episode? Damn it. Okay, let's go to the all episode thing. There's too many. Made too many episodes. Yeah, this is not good. Side. No. Maybe I didn't name it that. That could be a thing. That could be the problem here. Wait. It's got to be in the security thing, right? It wasn't that episode. So, is it ransomware? No. I think that's it. Yeah, client-side scanning. That was it. Now I can't remember what I was talking about. Well, we can fix that. I remember. What episode was that? That was pretty early on, I guess. Own episodes, except now my local server I'm running the show notes on is just the security, so I can just do as a security tag. So it was at some point under security. Whether it be running on your desktop or your phone or whatever. And that is just simply not what a password manager does. When an attacker is already in your system, all that point, what the password manager does, if they're in your operating system, they can do key logging. Basically, they can see what you're typing on your keyboard or entering in your phone. And then, I talked about this in a previous episode on client. What's it? Client side. So I talked about this in episode 70, where I discussed client-side scanning, which is kind of like a similar thing. It's like that's a way to attack end-to-end encrypted messengers, and it's kind of the same problem. Doesn't matter how well the messenger is encrypting something, or even how secure the actual messenger app, let's say on your phone is. If an attacker is inside your phone, inside the operating system, they can get the message between the app encrypting it and it being shown on your screen. And in the same way here, it doesn't matter how secure the actual password manager is. They can basically, if they're in your system, they can see you typing the password in before it gets encrypted and goes into the password vault. So and at that point, all bets are off. So it's important to understand that, password managers don't defend against that. And then also, what are you defending against? Criminals who want to steal your passwords, to impersonate you, to steal money. I don't know, cryptocurrency wallets, trying to hijack your accounts. Are you defending against that, or are you defending against state-sponsored actors like intelligence services? The latter one, if the password manager is well done, it depends on what kind of computing resources they have to crack encryption as well. But it's probably defending well against that as well. But because it doesn't defend against attacks on your local system, you always got to be aware that an intelligence service can just attack you that way, right? They can just put a Trojan on your system and don't even bother with decrypting the password wall if they actually want to attack you specifically, which, in that case, you probably have to be like a dissident or some kind of investigative journalist or something. Maybe I should be careful. But that's, you have to be, they don't do that to Joe Schmo. But if you really are defending against that, you have to be aware how difficult that is. Aside from software, they can always, if an actual, let's say an intelligence service of the state where you live, they could always break into your flat and put a little. Back in the day, they would take your keyboard apart, put something in there. These days, they just, I think, splice open the cable or whatever, or put it in the USB socket, put a little chip in there. So, at that point, all bets are off. And before I go on here and we talk about LastPass, one last thing I also want to mention, because, lots of people laugh about this, but if you go on Amazon, for example, you find lots of paper password books, like little Moleskine type notebooks where you could enter your password. And I would not recommend to buy one of those, because I don't think you want your password book to say passwords. But having a paper notebook is not something where you write in your internet password. It's not something you should laugh about. People make jokes about that, but that is a valid method that might work for some people, especially people who don't have that many websites. People like our parents, maybe, I don't know, depending on how many websites your parents use. But this is a valid security measure that works, and that has the added benefit. I mean, it can be inconvenient, but it has the added benefit that it's unhackable. It's like completely, it's not. I mean, they could hack your system and then see when you enter the password, of course, again, but like they can't get your password vault. It's not stored on the internet, it's stored in your desk. The downside is anybody who's at your desk can probably get to that. So it's always, security is always trade-offs, but I wanted to mention that because that is a valid thing to do. That is not insecure in itself. It might have different insecurities than having a password manager, but also it doesn't have certain insecurities that a password manager like LastPass has. So why are we talking about this? What happened at LastPass? Let's get into that. As Astro sees commenting in Twitch chat, of course I'm broadcasting this live as I mentioned, similar to the Triton 2 post-it note on the screen. Yeah, although, that's a bit sloppy. The main problem with that is it's just sloppy. Having an actual book and thinking about this is kind of more like the post-it is, also a metaphor for being, having bad password hygiene, so to speak. I would more maybe put it in the same league as having a TAN list, which is still probably the most secure way to actually, do banking, this kind of banking. Having TAN is on a list, on a paper list, certainly more secure than getting like SMS messages on your phone. These things have their uses. I just want to mention that. And of course, I also wanted to mention that, password managers are a good thing. I'm going to talk in depth about how one password manager fucked up, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't use them. On the contrary, you should use them. And at the end, I'm going to give some alternatives to LastPass that I think are good and usable. But first, let's go into how LastPass failed. What happened here? So LastPass is probably, I'm pretty sure it's the most popular password manager in the world, which makes it a huge target. So the fact that they've been breached and hacked a lot of times is really not surprising, because if you want to get a lot of passwords, LastPass is your number one port of call, which is why they have a big target on their back. And they have been breached over a dozen times since 2011, which was when the first documented breach was. I think product was released in 2008, as far as I can tell. But the most serious attacks happened last year, which is the ones we're going to talk about. So first, we had in August, we had a relatively benign sounding incident report, LastPass informing users of an issue. I'm reading from Wikipedia here, who has a good page on LastPass and these kind of breaches. So it says there on August 25th, 2022, LastPass published a blog post notifying customers that a third party gained unauthorized access to portions of their development environment, source code, and technical information through a single compromised developer account. Now, this was reported at the time, but at that moment, that's not good, especially for security relevant software, but it's also not the end of the world. At this point, nobody was guessing that users and certainly their passwords were affected. But what happened is that the data that got misappropriated in this breach led to a second attack. And this is the bad one. This was first publicized in November by LastPass, and then shortly before Christmas, we got details. Some people were saying that they released this before Christmas on purpose, so as kind of to fly under the radar. I don't think that was the case, because, as you saw, it was still widely reported, and there was big panic about this. It just looks like, if you look at the previous hacks and when they happened, and then when they released a statement and then they release more details, they have a timeline. This is kind of like an interval of a few weeks that always happens, where I guess they have probably external companies who do this kind of investigation into these hacks, and as you should do. You should have, as a big company, especially one that is security, sensitive, that does security sensitive software like LastPass. So I don't think at this point, I don't think that was malicious. But anyway, so shortly before Christmas, they informed everybody, the press, users, they wrote a blog post again. So Wikipedia again says, in November, LastPass published updates on the security breach and stated that some customer data was accessed by a third party. LastPass assured users that passwords stored with the service were still secure, as encryption and decryption of passwords takes place on the user's device. This wasn't the full story, though. In December, LastPass reported that the attacker obtained a backup of customer data and the customer vault data, the password databases, by using some of the information obtained in the August breach. The customer data included customers' names, billing addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, IP addresses, and partial credit card numbers. The vault data included for each breached user unencrypted website URLs and site names, and encrypted usernames, passwords, and form data for those sites. So when they talk about credit card numbers, they don't talk about those from the vault, right? Because some people have that in the LastPass vault. They talk about, from the billing data, like LastPass's billing data. According to the report, the stolen info did not include the user's master password, which would be required to access the encrypted portions of the vault data, such as usernames and passwords, and which LastPass does not store. The report suggested that providing a strong master password and many rounds of encryption were applied, it would take millions of years to decrypt the passwords. We're going to go into that. The report did not reveal when the vault data backup was made, when the vault data was stolen, how many users were affected, which fields in the vault data were encrypted or not, nor if the vault metadata was taken, including numbers of rounds of encryption used on the encrypted portions of the vault. Actually, we know that this is actually Wikipedia being, or the guy who wrote this, or gal on Wikipedia being dumb, because we're going to talk about these iterations, the numbers of times you run this password encryption function. I'm going to go into that later. We know that you have to know that to encrypt or decrypt. So that's always stored with the encrypted data. That's not secret information. It can't be, because the algorithm needs that to do its job. Now, this whole thing raises both security and privacy issues. The privacy issues is one of the reasons why I'm talking about this on the show as well. Not only because I think password managers are important, but also because that is an important issue that I think concerns people. And we'll get into that. But first I want to talk about the security issues, because that's the more important point here, especially if you use LastPass or have used it in the past. Now, first points, two points in the beginning here. Sorry, I'm a bit discombobulated today. I don't know why I keep talking shit, and now I'm almost spilling wine on myself. I don't know. Today it's been a pattern all day. I've been throwing money around in shops, like trying to pay, and just throw it all over the place. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, so let's first talk about the security issues. There's 2 points we have to make here right off. Since LastPass did not tell us how many password vaults were copied, we must assume it's every single one. Right? Everything you use is compromised. If they want to dispel that notion, they can tell us. I had a LastPass account. I've deleted it since. There were only old passwords and I haven't used it in years. But I haven't gotten any emails from them, really, just a very generic one. So they haven't told anybody. So I think we have to assume that everybody's vault's been compromised. They're also not saying when this backup that the guy that hacked them, or gal, or I don't know, state security agency, whatever, whoever did it, got into like a developer account, and basically they went to a service that stores backups for LastPass. Not only for LastPass, but they're part of GoTo. It's just like GoToMeeting and stuff, and they use the same backup infrastructure apparently. But like so they made off with the backup of users' vaults. Let's assume everybody's vaults. But we don't know when this backup was made, so we don't know like was it at that point. We're talking, I don't know, between August and November, let's say September of 2022. Was it like the current, like your September copy of the vault? Was it like 2 years old? Was it 5 years old? We don't know. And because of that, so the security of the vault hinges on your master password, because we don't know like at what point this vault was taken. We have to assume, like if you have a LastPass account and you think back what you used as a master password over the years, you have to assume that the weakest one is the one. You know, you're always in the security, like we're looking from the point of the person who is attacked or who's potentially being attacked. So we to be prudent, and especially as a journalist, I always do this, but like as a user as well in this case, to be prudent, we have to assume the worst. I'm saying that this is not, maybe they didn't take everybody's vaults. Maybe you're not affected. Maybe it's the most secure of the different passwords used in the past. The only thing we know, it's, you know, from, I don't know, it's got to be before August or whatever, right? Or before November, let's say. So anything you change after that doesn't really matter. You know, if you change it to a more secure password once you heard of the hack, that doesn't really matter. So we have to assume that, you know, just assume the worst. So if you're not affected, it's not your vault, it's a secure password, you know, well, you just count yourself lucky. But we'll have to assume that if you use LastPass at some point, you're affected, and that they may have gotten the copy of the vault with the weakest password you ever used. Now, technically, they haven't gotten the password. So technically, the security of the password vault is intact. That's what LastPass means when they say it's going to take millions of years. It's not going to take millions of years. Some security researchers who know what they're doing, like people who crack passwords for their living, like who make the software that hackers use, all kinds of hackers, to crack these passwords, have done calculations and assuming a really good password. And we're talking about a password that is so good that your password probably wasn't that good. Assuming that, and assuming the best possible levels of security, I'm going to get into that in a little bit, what I mean by that, but like assuming the best case scenario on the side of LastPass and your account, and, you know, assuming somebody does a serious effort and has several hundred GPUs at their disposal, it's probably in the 200, 300 years range, right? It's not millions of years, it's hundreds of years, which is okay. If that's the point, right? If it takes hundreds of years, you'll be long dead before they crack your password vault master password. And then what do you care if they got your passwords at the point where you're dead? But I'm going to get into some factors that make this a lot worse in a bit. But so technically what happened here is what a password vault protects against, right? A password manager is a program where you enter your passwords for your websites, and as I said, it doesn't protect against your system being hacked. What it protects against, it stores an encrypted database of these passwords in the cloud at some provider service, and it protects against this provider getting hacked and a hacker running off with that encrypted database. Which is what we have here, which is the worst case scenario for a password manager. Aside from they made a programming mistake and your software, your data wasn't actually encrypted and they got it all in plain text. which should never happen, really. So leaving that absolute catastrophe aside, this is like the second worst scenario, but it's one that the password manager protects against. The problem we have here is that LastPass did that, but they made some, over the years, they made some procedural mistakes in how they do that, like how they stepped up their security, and that presents serious issues for people who use LastPass. Because basically what they didn't do was upgrade this process. Because over the last, 10 years, or, ever since 2008, when LastPass first came out, we made advances. Like the people cracking passwords made advances, the biggest one being using GPUs, right, to crack passwords. So in the very early days, you just hashed the password, and that was enough. And then people invented rainbow tables, which is you basically what you do is you pre-compute all the hashes. You go through a list of all possible passwords that you can think about. You pre-compute all the hashes. I mean, hashing works, and you have a password. You hash that, you get a hash. And you can do it one way, but not the other. So with the hash, you can't get back to the password. But what you can do is you can hash all the passwords in the world and write down the hashes for that. And once you've done that work once and you've published that list, which is called a rainbow table, you can go back, look at a hash and say, oh, that's that password. So if a database like this leaks and you get lots of password hashes, you can figure out the actual passwords from that pre-computed list. Now, people invented technology against that, salting, had all this kind of stuff. So that's not usable anymore. So we defeated that. But then people came up with, hey, we can, instead of CPUs, we can use GPUs, which can do parallel computing really fast. And then we can brute force passwords. And this is not something that was done when LastPass was invented. So they did some steps to mitigate that, but basically what you have to do is if you don't do a password manager, you can't just make a password manager and then sell it and be happy and do another project. You have to keep that software updated, or somebody has to, with the state of the art of the people cracking the passwords, right? And that's what LastPass didn't do. But before we get into that, let's have a little aside here at this point. And I'm going to explain very quickly, so just so people who are not into this or not nerdy or not IT security nerds can understand what I'm talking about here going forward. So I'm going to do a very quick high-level overview, generally how a password manager works, right? So a password manager wants to encrypt some data, your passwords, the URLs of the page you're logging in, a credit card number, whatever. And it wants to do that on your local computer before storing whatever is encrypted, like the resulting blob of data, in the cloud. And it wants to do that locally because you do that with an encryption key, right? You use an encryption algorithm, in this case, something called AES, which is based on a cipher called Rheindal, which everybody uses for this kind of thing, which is very secure. We pondered on this for decades. We know it's good. To do that, you need a key. You feed that into the algorithm. You feed the data into the algorithm. You get a blob of data that looks like pseudo-random noise that you can just store in the cloud. Like for a long time I had a local password manager that just generated this blob on my computer, and then I just stored the blob in Dropbox. Because I didn't care. Like even when I figured out who was it, Condoleezza Rice was on the board of Dropbox. I don't know. Donald Trump could have run Dropbox. I don't care, because I just stored a blob of pseudo-random data there that nobody can ever decrypt without that key. Now, the problem that password managers have is you could just use an encryption key, but you can't store that. You can't store that key safely, right? How are you going to do that? So my problem, I'm on a desktop computer. I have a password manager here. Let's say we don't use a password, a master password. We just use an encryption key, and I enter that. Like I have that stored as a file on my computer, which is a problem in itself, but let's just assume that for the moment. And I enter that into the password manager to unlock it, to open it, to put new passwords in, to read out passwords. okay, that kind of works. But now I want to also use the same passwords. I want to synchronize it with my phone, which is what password managers do. They're available everywhere. They synchronize your passwords over all available systems that you have. How am I going to get that file on the phone? Right, these days where nobody plugs their phone into the computer and uses, I don't know, back in the day on Android I could just mount the file system, or on iOS I'd have to use iTunes, and you don't want to synchronize that file around, because if you lose that file, anybody can decrypt that password vault. So what people came up with, basically, because you can't store storing the encryption key with the password vault, that blob of data would be like having a locked box with your valuables in it and then storing the key next to it, right? Anybody who has the box, has the key, can just open the box. So you can't store that key. So people came up with an ingenious idea, which is called a key derivation function, the most famous one is the password-based key derivation function, and PBKDF, we use PBKDF2, or LastPass uses, almost all password managers use it. You can use other functions that are better, whatever. Let's not get into that. But a key derivation function, what it does, it takes a password. You have one password, the password for your password manager that you have to remember. It takes that password and it creates an AES key and uses that to encrypt and decrypt your data. And it never stores that key because it doesn't have to. You have a little a program or a piece of JavaScript running in your browser that when you want to open your password vault on the website or in the app on your computer or on your phone, you enter your password, and it uses this key derivation function to generate the encryption key on the fly in RAM and uses that to unlock. It doesn't save that anywhere, and that's how password managers works. That's the underlying, innovation under password managers of password managers that kind of sync your passwords everywhere. And that's the promise, that you just have to remember that one password. And that is ingenious, and it works really well. And that system in itself works really well. And the encryption works really well. AES encryption, we've solved that. We've worked that out. We know how to do that securely. And LastPass did all that. But what they didn't do is this general principle of taking your master password, creating an encryption key, encrypting or decrypting your password vault, right? Just fetching that encrypted data from the cloud, encrypting, decrypting it locally. They did all of that, but you kind of have, as I said before, you kind of have to keep that up to date with current developments. And so one thing they did do when LastPass started, they used something called, so there's different ways to encrypt with AES in that way. So there's for example, LastPass used to use AES ECB, which is that's an electronic code book. That's a way of doing, AES is a so-called block cipher, and that's a block cipher mode. If you want to know how all this works in detail, go to privatecitizen.press. I got links in the show notes. But basically, what you want to use these days is called AES CBC. And what they used is AES ECB. I forgot what CBC stands for. Cipher blockchaining, right? So cipher blockchain is what you want to use. Electronic code book is kind of out the window. It's not state of the art anymore. Now, when LastPass started out, they used ECB. They haven't updated that for a significant amount of users, it seems. They also, and this is much more important, so the way these key derivation functions work is you don't use them once, you use them a lot of times. And these days you use them a lot of times. When LastPass started, they used PBKDF2 once, which was kind of the way to do it back then. That was considered secure. At some point they upped that to 500 times, 5,000 times. Now they use it like 100,000 times roughly. And that's even not considered secure anymore. And this is because of GPUs. Because basically you have to crank up that number. You have to, because basically you're doing it one way, let's say 500 times, which uses some computational resources. To do it backwards, to crank it, takes a lot more time. So you just do it 500 times, which on your computer just takes a few milliseconds. And then to undo it will take, instead of 20 seconds, we're now, when you do it once, we're now talking, I don't know, a few weeks. And then if you do it 5,000 times, we're talking, a few months or a year maybe. And then now if you do it 100,000 times, we get to the 200 years number. And you can even do it 1 million times, and then we're in a territory where, you probably can't really crack it anymore. So what LastPass didn't do is when they themselves, for new users, upped this number, and said, okay, so now we have to do it 500 times. We have to do this process 5,000 times. They apparently didn't up it for existing users. And one thing they also didn't do apparently was, they, over the years, at the beginning, they enforced the rule that your password had to have 8 characters. And then they realized, well, for a for website password, for any password, that's too short. But there's a difference between having a website password and having a master password for your password world where all your passwords are in. So they started enforcing, or they said they were starting to enforce longer passwords, but apparently they never did this, especially for existing users. So I checked this. So I did, before I deleted it, I did have a LastPass vault. So earlier this week, I did some checking. And I don't know when I started using LastPass. I haven't used it for years. But I still had that vault. I didn't delete it because there weren't any, all of these passwords, I'm pretty sure, except maybe 2 or 3 that really aren't important. And ones for websites that don't exist anymore, I've changed over the years. So it wasn't really that important to me. But so I had an old LastPass account that had been around for years. I don't know. I didn't start using LastPass in 2008. I'm pretty sure. Maybe 2012 or something. I don't know. Can't remember. But my iterations were set to 1. Which means if they copied my LastPass vault and you were gonna crack this on even a machine with, I don't know. I don't even know if you need 100 GPUs for this. You can kind of crack this in seconds. At least on one of these state-of-the-art 100 GPU machines. You could crack my master password no matter how long it is, basically in seconds. Best case scenario, maybe a few days or weeks. So my LastPass is owned. And also, I checked with the tool. Steve Gibson talked about this on Security Now episode 904, 905, and in 905, he has the listeners of Security Now. One listener built a tool. You can dump some stuff from LastPass. You log into your LastPass account. You dump some stuff from the web browser developer console, and then basically the blob of your password vault, and then you can check the encryption, and pretty much I think about 98% of my vault was encrypted with ECP, so the old encryption, which has some flaws. For example, read up on it on Wikipedia. All the details are in private citizen.trust. Doesn't really matter. You can tell that if you reuse a password on certain sites, you can tell that it's the same password. You can't do that with CBC. But that's really not that important. The iteration thing is worse because much worse because that means basically the protection of my vault that LastPass stored wasn't there. I might have had a blank password, kind of the same effect. I don't know why. I don't think my LastPass account was that old that I signed up when that was still the default. I don't know if the NSA bit was set, and somebody said, let's set that to 1. The thing is, you can just set that, right? Like, even if it was at a different, more protected setting, if somebody, I certainly didn't do it, would have set that to 1, then, the next time I entered my password, it like basically regenerates that key, it re-encrypts the vault with like a weak key. And in another matter, if you had set that higher, then like the next time it encrypted, it would have done that more securely. So basically what this whole thing looks like is LastPass was, by all accounts, it was developed by, I think, a pretty cool programmer who started it in the beginning. It was sensible software, and many security experts recommended it for a long time. And I think what happened is they had some state-of-the-art technology, and they just didn't keep up with it, right? They neglected to update the security, especially, new users signed up, and they had new security guidelines, right? More key derivation iterations, maybe different password strength they enforced. They switched to another AES mode. But if you were an existing user, it seems like they didn't upgrade your account security, which is dumb. That is like incredibly dumb. And it really is unexcusable. So the result is that, I don't know, if you don't know this, I mean, you could check this, but like if you don't know, or you've deleted your LastPass account, but you don't know if like your vault wasn't in the backup, right? You can't be sure at that point what these settings were. And especially if your password didn't have enough entropy, i.e. wasn't too long enough or complicated enough, this means that probably somebody has your LastPass vault right now and can crack it if they want to. And because this iteration number, as I explained earlier, is kind of not encrypted, it's public, it has to be, because the algorithm has to know how many iterations it needs to do to encrypt or decrypt correctly. They can just, whoever has these vaults will probably start with the vaults that have the iteration set to 1, because that would be like trivial to crack that, right? So people like me are just owned. I mean, I'm not, because I've changed all these passwords years ago, but still, right? This is a problem. And basically, what LastPass didn't do was pay attention, right? They knew that new technology came on the scene, the ability to use GPUs to crack passwords. I also have a link about that in the show notes if you want to read about that. privatecitizen.press, episode 141. And, they knew that because they updated the settings for some users, but not all of them. And that is the real problem. So the real problem here isn't really the security of, the kind of the architecture in itself. They didn't have like a massive flaw or like an oversight or anything like that. Basically, they had a good system, and they just neglected to keep it up to date, which you have to do when you do software like this. And then on top of that, they also did another mistake, which I also want to talk about, which is basically, which caused a pretty significant privacy issue, which I think also we shouldn't neglect. So I kind of want to talk about that next. And I will, no, I can't. Wait. I just want to add a cue point here. I'm going to take a little break here. My wife just came home, and I just want to say hello. So I'll take a break of about 5 to 10 minutes, and then I'll continue with the show. I hope that's okay. Let me see if I can put some music on here. What we have? Epidemic jazz. Let's put some jazz on here. Oh, why can't I play this? Oh, here we go. Let me just see. What's the level on that? Let me turn that down a little. Okay. I'll go to a break for about 5-10 minutes, and then I'll be back and I'll continue with the show. See you in a bit. Ooh, that is lovely. All right, I'm back. Let's keep going here. Where was I? Here. Let's talk about the privacy issues. So, yeah, let's talk about the privacy issues then. The security stuff wasn't the only thing that LastPass didn't keep up. Well, I don't know if this particular problem is where they didn't keep up, because I don't understand why they didn't do this from the beginning. So what LastPass didn't do was encrypt. Oh, I don't like this. I don't like how I did this. I'm going to redo this. Let's do that again. So let's talk about the privacy issues here. This is another point where LastPass didn't keep up with. Well, I don't know if this was about, keeping up with the types in this case. It's more like, I don't understand why they didn't do this from the beginning. So one of the things LastPass didn't do was encrypt certain metadata, including, and this is the most important part, the URL. Every password in a password manager, generally, most of these are web passwords, so you save the password and the URL. That belongs to that, your amazon.co.uk and your Amazon password. Now, any other password manager I know encrypts this information. And I really don't understand how they couldn't, it's trivial to do. You're encrypting the other information, you can encrypt that as well. And as you can see from the screenshot in the show notes where I used that tool from Security Now, that just works on the unencrypted data. And the URLs are, I think, in hex. They're encoded because, I have to send them over the web, but they're in plain text. So you can see there all the URLs. You can't see the passwords, but you can see the URLs. Now, that is huge. Because that means that anybody who has these vaults can build a profile of users, right? They can probably almost, just like advertising companies can figure out who you are based on what websites you visit. They have all the websites presumably that you use passwords for, so all the important websites you visit, so they can build a profile of you. And without decrypting the vault, this is stuff they just have. Then we're not talking like GPUs and brute forcing stuff here. They just have that information because it wasn't encrypted. And LastPass had that basically on their service the whole time, which I didn't know. Had I known that, I'd never used LastPass. I don't think. It wasn't public since at least 2017. I just never realized that. So this was a problem that LastPass knew about and did nothing about. They knew because it's their, software, but also the public knew. So I think this hack that fact in itself is probably worth this hack and this attack. Even for somebody like an intelligence service or a state actor, if they got all the LastPass vaults, they have data on millions of users now on the websites they visit, and that in itself is extremely valuable. It is incredibly handy if you have the vault and you want to crack some of these passwords to figure out who you want to crack. Because if you're hunting for crypto wallets, and you can see there's a Coinbase URL in there, right? And if you then see that the iterations were set to 1 as well, like on my vault, then Bob's your uncle, you're in there, you've got some cryptocurrency. And apparently there's already a class action lawsuit against LastPass, and the guy who started it actually says he lost some cryptocurrency because of this. I don't know how true that is. But, it's conceivable. And this is just, it makes me paranoid. And I've talked about this with some people on the internet over the last 3 days. And I've always been somewhat paranoid. And then I started, doing IT security research, and I realized, I got even more paranoid. And I never really trusted tech companies. I don't trust any companies, but I never specifically, I'm not like one of these tech guys, techie dudes who thought like tech companies are better companies, or they try to better the planet, or because they often say that some part of their marketing. I never believed any of this. If anything, that made me more averse to believing that and made me more skeptical. But I started out not having a lot of confidence in companies and in tech companies, but my trust of tech companies has hit an all-time low in the last few weeks, because been working through all these Twitter files, and I think they're indicative, and I'm going to talk about that on the show at some point as well. It's not only Twitter, it's all the tech companies, certainly all the social networking companies, but I think all the tech companies are pretty much the same. I don't my trust for these people is at an all-time low now, and so that makes me kind of maybe paranoid. And then I'm thinking, if some intelligence service, or some, as some of them, especially in the US, FBI, brand themselves, law enforcement agencies, if they figured out that LastPass wasn't encrypting this data, I think they would have probably tried to keep it that way, right? Because even aside from this hack and this attack and these vaults getting out, we now know, and we've apparently known since 2017, except I wasn't paying attention, that any intelligence service, any law enforcement agency in the US that would have subpoenaed LastPass for some data would have known what websites any LastPass user visited. And in itself, lots of people have that information, right? My ISP has that information, although that's getting less, with HTTPS and DNS starting to be secured. But, advertising agencies have this information. So that in itself, that is not such a bombshell. But to me, it's just like a huge breach of trust when we're talking about a company that prides itself on respecting the security and the privacy of its users, which somebody who runs a password manager does. That's what their whole marketing was based upon. We are secure. We don't even know. We can't decrypt your passwords. We're not giving that to law enforcement because we can't. All of that, and then they don't encrypt metadata like this, which would have been trivial. Would have been trivial to encrypt this, and that kind of I don't know, makes me think. I'm like. And together with, I don't know, because I can't remember, and I have no way. I tried to check. I have no way. Sadly, I deleted my LastPass account because I'm an idiot. Before it occurred to me to figure out how old my account was, and I tried to look in my email archives, and I can't really figure this out. So, but together with the paranoia that I should have joined LastPass at least when their iteration were at 500. Per default, and mine are set to 1. Now I'm getting this paranoia. Did somebody at one point set these to 1 to get to be able to get my passwords more easily, or to degrade my either? Probably not, but these days, I don't know. I just think that is just unexcusable. And leaving all that aside, never implementing that as a password manager, like never, I would say going that extra step, but it's not even going that extra step because every other password manager, as far as I know, does this. Like, I didn't know this, and it didn't even occur to me to check because otherwise I would have found this information, which has been public since at least 2017. It links in the show notes, Private Citizen Press. It didn't even occur to me that a password manager would not encrypt that information. Like, that's it. That's like designing a car without brakes. And we don't need any brakes. You're gonna, at some point, you're gonna run into something, and then you're gonna stop sooner or later, right? It's like, what the hell? Yeah. So with all that out of the way, you probably, if you're still using LastPass, you want an alternative. So let's quickly talk about, where you can go to and who you can, use to better take care of your passwords. So there are two alternatives that I've used in recent years that I would recommend. The first one being a service called 1Password, which, there's the two I would recommend are 1Password and Bitwarden. Now I think I'm personally using Bitwarden right now. 1Password I think is better for less technical users. Bitwarden is free. You get pretty much all of the features free. 1Password you have to pay, but I think it's worth it. I think the features, I think the interface is a lot nicer. I kind of like 1Password. Full disclosure, and I put this in the show notes as well. Full disclosure, I do have used in the past. I have a free account, a free family account. From 1Password because they have this journalism initiative. If you're a journalist, in the interest of keeping journalists secure, they give journalists a free family account, basically lifetime account. And I've used that in the past, so I haven't paid for it. Full disclosure. I think that is I'm biased because I'm a journalist, but, and especially a poor freelancer like me. But I think that's a really cool gesture. So I kind of do like him for that. That said, I have switched to Bitwarden, which I think is probably, if you're a bit more technical, lots of listeners of this podcast probably are, as I know my audience. Bitwarden is probably more for you. It's a bit less polished, but it is open source. And it has the additional benefit that you can host your own server. I think you have to pay for it. I'm using the free version. The free version does everything I want to do. It has apps for phones and stuff, and does biometric unlock on the phones and all that. So it has all the features that I was used to from 1Password before that. But it does, if you pay for it, you can run your own server, so you can host it yourself if you want to do that. Of course, if you're doing that, that has the downside that you have to secure that server, storing a password vault on that server. So you have to be, you have to recognize that. On the other hand, it's just a random server. People will have to find it. It's not like your LastPass or Bitwarden and they want to attack you. And, on the other hand, those guys know to secure these servers. Well, wait, LastPass didn't. Okay. I don't know. I think both of those are fine. There are other alternatives which I haven't tried in recent years. 1Password is an open source, but it has a lot of credentials from a lot of cryptographers and security experts I respect. Use it, have looked at it, know people who worked in developing it, and it has a lot of people that know what they're doing, saying these guys know what they're doing and they're doing this correctly. And I think both of these companies are keeping their shit up to date, not like LastPass. I actually I didn't know that, as I mentioned before. I didn't know that about LastPass. Obviously that they didn't keep their stuff up to date, but I kind of had a feeling. The reason I switched is it was before the acquisition by GoTo, I think. But it's like they, I don't know, they were giving me too much of a corporate vibe at some point. Like they were too, it just felt to me that were too much like profit oriented. It's a weird thing to say because, these other companies are also companies that want to make money, but you know what I mean, right? There's like companies and companies. There's like smaller companies and companies who feel more like, they're in tune with what their customers want. And then the companies that get a bit too big and they now focus on business and they do all this business crap. I didn't have a good feeling about LastPass. That's why I switched. Turns out that was probably a good instinct, probably too late because they have my vault now anyway, but okay. So I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like anything. There's people, right? And Steve Gibson is one of these on security. Now he always goes on about trust no one. And, there's this buzzword of zero knowledge and zero trust. That doesn't exist, right? In security, in anything in life, you always have to trust somebody. Always. You're using software from somebody. Either they're a company, even if it's open source, right? You're not like, even if the source code was audited, you're not checking that the binary you're running on your system is actually that compiled source code. Like, there's some very insane people who do this, but they don't get a lot of stuff done generally. Or they're Linux kernel developers and they're doing this shit all day. But like, a normal person who also has a job and has things to do can't do that. So you're always trusting somebody. You're trusting the maintainer of that open source project, the guy who runs the project. There could be a backdoor in there. You don't know. You always have to trust somebody. I mean, you're running Windows, you're trusting Microsoft. You're running iOS, you're trusting Apple. They could put a backdoor in there and then all bets are off anyway, as I said at the beginning of the show. So you always have to trust somebody. So you get burned. It's what happens. It's what happens. What are you going to do if you got burned by LastPass? I mean, switch to an alternative. And if you're like me, like I'm pretty sure that I have to assume that my account is owned, right? We have to assume, because they didn't tell us when the backup was like taken, like from what time frame that backup was. They didn't tell us what vaults are, as I said in the beginning, compromised. So I have to assume my vault was compromised. So I have to assume all the, one iteration, I have to assume all the passwords are compromised. I checked those passwords and I've changed all of the relevant ones. And if I was you, and I would also change this password. I don't want to tell you to change passwords because that's also bad. Also, there's all these initiatives, that for a long time, a lot of the press was also writing about, change your passwords. Just as I said in the beginning, it's all like a consideration. It's all like everything anything in security. It's a consideration between convenience and security, and there's no absolutes. So you don't have to change all the passwords, right? I mean, there's websites where you have shitty passwords or you have good passwords, but they've been leaked. But who cares, right? Who like, there's lots of accounts where you logged in to some, I don't know, online newspaper where you had to create an account. So they got your email address. So then you could read the article. But like, there's nothing on there. It's like a forum. The worst thing somebody could do would be to impersonate you on that forum, right? But like, it's not your Twitter account. or like your LinkedIn account, where like your careers on the line. It's not your bank. Those are the passwords you should definitely change if you're in doubt. But yeah, so like everything, you have to kind of have a judgment call there. But I would say assume the worst always, right? And then think, is how important are these passwords? What am I defending against? Now, whatever password manager you use, if you continue LastPass, doesn't matter. Any other, I wouldn't recommend that, but whatever password manager you use, the idea of a password manager is that you have one password that you remember. That's why the one password is called one password. And then all the other ones you can just generate in the password manager, make them really long, make them secure. And then hopefully I don't have to change them that often. Make them random in the password manager. That's the very idea. But that whole idea depends on that password, the main master password that creates the key that encrypts everything, that has to be secure. Now, just some quick tips in case you're switching a password manager anyway. You might want to, especially, if you had the LastPass, don't reuse that LastPass master password. Take a new one. If you do that, pick a new one. How are you going to make that secure? Now, the rule of thumb is the longer the better. Make it a passphrase, a really long phrase, whatever. You probably want to remember that. I mean, there's some people who just write that down and have that written down and carry that with them in their wallet or whatever. That is also a valid thing to do. I create a very long sentence that I modify a bit. You can modify stuff based on, basically how your brain works. In reality, the best defense would be entropy. So the more randomness in the password, the better. So it doesn't really have to be that long if it's really random. I don't know, if it's 20 completely random characters, that is uncrackable pretty much. As far as we know, it doesn't matter what problems LastPass had, that is almost uncrackable. The problem that we have with these vaults and the passwords, and aside from all the iterations, is that most passwords aren't just that strong. But nobody can remember. Very few people can remember 20 completely random characters. So the workaround is just make it long. Make it 80 characters. Make it a sentence. Make it 80 characters. Make it 100 characters. And then of course. The way people crack this is they use, they used to use dictionary stuff. They use language patterns, how likely are certain words. They probably these days use machine learning algorithm or whatever that are trained on song lyrics or whatever people use. Passages from books, slogans, whatever. So don't use that, or if you do, change it in a way. But generally make it long. I mean, there's the famous, I put it in the show notes because everybody mentions this when you talk about this kind of thing. There's the famous XKCD comic about this horse battery staple. Don't use that password, but that explains it a little bit. There's also some links. Steve Gibson, actually, from Security Now, who I talked about on the show before, on this episode, has a site called Password Haystacks that at the bottom has some good resources on password strength, and also has this what he calls a search space calculator where you can experiment with this kind of thing. But generally, you want a very complicated sentence. Hopefully something that can't be found like this on the internet, maybe because you changed it a bit, or because it's just very long. If it's just very, very, very long, it probably doesn't matter that it's a sentence from the Bible or whatever, well-known sentence, because the way people crack passwords is they go A, B, they start with short passwords and then they never, because that takes so much time, they never get to the 40 character stuff. Unless, it's a question of who you're defending against. Unless, some intelligence service is is actually targeting you and is trying to really specifically hack your password, then they're probably going to try to find out, I don't know, what books you like. And then they're specifically going to try every sentence out of that book or whatever. But in general, if you have a very long past sentence, past sentence, so that's not a thing. Passphrase is the word I'm looking for. You're probably pretty well off, like that XKCD comic, right? If you go correct was battery staple, those are English words that you can find in the dictionary. But because they're very, very long, they're not, the entropy in those words isn't high because they don't use all the characters in the alphabet. But they're better than an 8 pseudo-random characters probably. Because, you can they're just 8 characters. And here you have 4 words. How many characters is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 22, 20, 25, whatever characters. It's going to be more entropy just by being a longer sentence. So that's why, in general, longer is better. But, I could probably do a whole episode on how to do secure passwords. If people are interested in that, I might do that at some point. But I think that's enough for this episode. To wrap it up, use a password manager. And, if a paper notebook is the password manager for you, I'm not going to laugh at you. That is a sound strategy if it works for you. You just have to know what it defends against and what it doesn't defend against. That might be also a combination. There might be some passwords that are so critical, but they're very critical, but you don't use them often. So maybe you just don't want to put them in your password manager. You just don't want to put them on an electronic medium at all. You just have those in your notebook, right? That might be an approach. But generally, use a password manager. And after what we've learned about LastPass, don't use LastPass. Use one password, use Bitwarden, and don't assume that those are perfect now. We could learn the same thing about them in 5 years, that they haven't kept up, that they have made some silly mistakes. It can always happen. You always have to trust somebody. It's security is always a weighing of your options, right? You can just try to, generally with stuff we do on this podcast, be critical, stay critical, try to make the best decisions in the moment, and hope for the best, and hope like me, and for some reason your password key derivation function iteration setting was set to 1 and you're fucked. Luckily I moved. Luckily there weren't any important passwords. Otherwise I would be really I wouldn't be panic. In that case you change the important passwords right away and then you change the rest. It's what it is, I guess. So if you have some input on this, if you want an episode on password strength, if you want anything else, let me know. You can do that by writing to the feedback email address. I'm going to tell you what that is right now. Well, that was obviously a lie because I played the jingle before I told you, but yeah. If you go to privatecitizen.press, there's a producer feedback section in the shout notes. there's a contact link at the top of the page, and there's ways to contact me, many ways, and I would appreciate very much if you do so, because it's kind of important to me. I do the show for you, and so if you tell me I do this, I'm one of the few journalists that are still out there that work for their audience. So I work for you basically. So let me know what you want. I had a lot of feedback over the last few months, pretty much weeks, about the upcoming 3rd anniversary episode. So on the 5th of February, this podcast is turning 3 years old. And people were asking, what are you going to do for that episode? Because last year I skipped that because I was finishing my novel. But this year I won't. So people were asking, what are your plans? So what I was thinking, because this is also something I've been asked about a lot over the years. So I kind of want to do an episode where I can explain. I did this episode where I explain my background, but I want to, previously, but I want to go a little bit deeper in kind of my history in journalism, because, I'm very critical of journalists, and something I'm often asked about, and kind of explain why I do this show and why I do it the way I do it, and basically build that out to a little bit of a wider philosophical episode that probably it's kind of a bit navel-gazing, that doesn't really fit, doing another. I think that would be a good anniversary episode. So if you have any specific questions about that, or if you have another idea or any other topics you find interesting for that anniversary episode, or for anything else, please contact me. Let me know. That would be very important to me. But, it's just something people have asked me and I've had on my list for a long time. And I thought, well, we'll just do it. Why not do it as a kind of special episode, kind of explain that, explain kind of how I became the type of journalist I am now, and why I'm convinced that, I've talked a lot about the problems with journalism that I see, and I think I will try to be more of an episode talking about what I think the solutions are, or what my personal solutions are, right? Why am I doing this? And one of the reasons I'm doing this is because people support the show, of course, but also, that's certainly not why I do the show. It's not why I started the show. It's kind of necessary that I can live of it, I guess, to some extent, or that it be a part of my income so I can survive. But I certainly do it as a labor of love, and that's why I do my job in general. It's a calling for me more than a job. And I want to talk about that a little bit, and I think it would also benefit anybody listening to the show, just like I did that episode where I talked about kind of how I grew up and what my political beliefs are and how my parents raised me. That kind of gives you a background, and it gives you makes you understand my biases and why I talk about things the way I do. Anyway, let's talk about supporting the show, because I mentioned that. So as I said, I don't do the show specifically to get paid. Otherwise I wouldn't do a listener supporter show probably. But it's still something I can need to survive. So if you want to support the show, Private Citizen or Press, the details are on there. Basically, I have a Patreon. That's how you can support the show best. That's what kind of helps me out. Of course, you get it for free. It's a value for value model. You decide what value you derive from it. But I would like to thank the people that support me in doing this kind of thing. So, here are my Patreon supporters, my showrunners, Sir Galtaran. I feel like I have to salute because he's a sir. No agenda royalty. Sir Galtaran. Indie Gamiacs. It's my other showrunner. And we have executive producers Butterbeans. It's a good name. I just love that name. Butterbeans. Jaroslav Lichtblau, Rizal, and Sandman616. And then we have the supervising producers, 1i11g. Name trips me up every time. It's probably why they picked that name. Avis, Bennett Piata, Dave, IKN, Jackie Plage, Jonathan, that trips me up every time as well because I'm in English mode, but Jonathan M. Hitai is originally from Germany, so to do that justice. Crunkle, Michael Mullen Jensen, which trips everybody up because it's half Irish, half Danish. That shouldn't be allowed as a name, really. And Robert Forster. And then the producers. This is like one of these modern TV shows where they have more. It's like, was it that Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon? I noticed this. And I think the Lord of the Rings show almost was even worse. They have like more producers than actors. Here we just have one guy in front of the mic and a ton of producers, but I'm kind of happy because, pay some of my bills. So thanks my producers as well, Andrew Davidson, Astral C, Cam, Captain Egghead, David Potter, Dirk Didi, Florian Pigorsch, Joe Poser, the German English, this trips me up every time, Michael Small, Mika, Mr. Amish, Rick Bragg, and RJ Tracy. By the way, the German English, I say that because of the way these are ordered. That's Patreon. I just get it out that way. Some of this is alphabetic, but like the other stuff isn't. So I think the showrunners aren't. I don't know. Blame Patreon. It's just not my fault. And then also the associate producers, Barry Williams, D, Jonathan Johanssonen, Kai CS, Ricky M, Steve O's, and Vlad. So thanks to all of you. I appreciate it very much. Thanks for the support. You keep, that's why you're producers. You're keeping the show running. Of course, everybody's a producer. Also, the people writing in and providing feedback. But, I kind of needed some titles, so I thought I'll steal those from Hollywood. I also have to thank Bytemark at bytemark.co.uk, British cloud hosting company. They provide the bandwidth and the server space that enables me to send you this podcast. If you're not watching live on Twitch or you watching on YouTube, if you get the actual podcast, the MP3 file, that's down to Bytemark, and I couldn't do it without them. So thanks for that. And yeah, let's get out of here. I'm very discombobulated today. I'm sorry. I don't know where that is. I got up earlier than usual, and I went bouldering in the morning. I'm really not a morning person, but it kind of works out with my schedule right now. But maybe that's maybe doing a podcast on that day is then not a good option in the evening. I don't know. I'll have to figure that out. Anyway, thanks for bearing with me. I hope this episode was helpful to you. A little bit of a deviation from what we usually do, but I tend to talk about IT security topics here as well if they're important. Let me know what you think about that. And the theme tune of this podcast, I want to mention that as well, because credit where credit's due. I don't have to do this. I just licensed it. I could just use it, but I like to give people credit. So, song's called Acoustic Roots by Raoul Kabazadi, and it's grown very dear to my heart. And but I want to mix it up, so I always play us out with a different song. But this is from somebody who I've played before on this show, Lupus Nocte, who does some amazing synthwave on Epidemic Sound. So this is Final Run by Lupus Nocte. And I'll I don't know when the next episode, there won't be episodes next week, I'm pretty sure. I'm gonna try to get one out before that, but I tried that last week as well. over the weekend, and it just wasn't happening. But sometimes I have to cut my losses and also spend some time with my wife. It's also important to me. So sometimes that just happens. We'll see. I will try, but I can't promise anything. Yeah. That's about it. Aim to misbehave and get off LastPass. I use the time while the song plays to get myself another drink. See you in a second. A minute maybe. That song was not as long as I thought. Well, kind of was away for a bit of it, so that's probably the reason. Anyway, let's get this podcast edited. Then I'm going to do that live, of course, because after that, I'm going to do some gaming. I think I got time. I think I should do that. What are you saying, Astro? Did you floss now? What do you mean floss? Did I open source something? Is that a dance? What are you referring to? I don't get the reference. Maybe I'm too much of a boomer. The Fortnite dance. Oh God, no! I fucking hate Fortnite. I wouldn't know where to start. When I stopped playing PUBG, some of the people I played PUBG with after that went to Fortnite, and I went to Tarkov, and that should tell you everything about me. Like, that's too bright. There's too many kids. They're all jumping up and down. Fuck that game. Yeah, and at least Tarkov doesn't have a dance. At least I'm not aware of it. Yeah, aim to misbehave. Now I have to look that up, right? Was it Fortnite? Floss? Oh God. Oh God. Yeah. Fuck off. Oh. I think I've seen this. I think I've seen some young people do this at a club once. Oh, you do, God. Alright. That's enough of that. for a lifetime. No, I didn't do that, Astral. Yeah. Of course not.
Aim to misbehave and get off LastPass.
Cringe at the Zoomers. Yeah, God, I've got Zoomer. Oh my God, I was bouldering. That's such a culture clash. Old man goes to the bouldering gym. Well, fucking Zoomers everywhere.
Yeah. Aim to misbehave and get off LastPass.
That actually, I don't even have to cut that. That works amazing timing wise. Okay. I want to cut this. Doesn't that have an auto level? Did that as auto level? Here we go. All right. Cringe. Fucking Zoomers. But next generation, whatever that alpha or whatever, that's gotta be much worse. They're called alphas. They're so far from being alpha. I do this every time. You're listening. It's too loud. Whole thing. Ah, for fuck's sake, I don't want to do that. Too loud. You're listening to the private citizen. Okay. So let's level that one way at that one. That just no, that's the 80s. When the Zoomers weren't born. Oh yeah. Yep, sounds good. All right. You're listening to The Private Citizen, a Civil Liberties podcast. This is episode 141 for Tuesday, the 17th of January 2023. How LastPass made itself obsolete. Hello everybody, my name is Fab. I'm coming to you live from Düsseldorf in Germany. You know, with that out of the way, let's get into the topic at hand here. Did I just do the McDonald's jingle there? Oh my God. The topic at hand here. So before I want to talk about LastPass, I think this is the point where we need to edit. Is it site? That's not good. Okay. What episode was that? System key logging. Basically, you can see what you're typing on your keyboard or entering in your phone, and then I talked about this in a previous episode on client. What's it? Client side. Oh God, now I have to look this up. Luckily, the show notes have like these tags at the top, right? There's a security tag. So it was at some point under security. So I can just do some research here. Private Citizen Press. Let's cut it there. Completely seamlessly. Cut all this shit out. So yeah, I talked about this in episode 70. completely seamless. Do.
Private citizen of press. So yeah, I talked. Security, so I can just do some research here. Private citizen of press. So yeah, I talked about this in episode 70.
That's like nothing ever happened. The magic of editing. Why is this leveled differently? I'm not a fan of this. Can't be getting like quieter through the show. That's no good thing. Come on, you bitch. Thank you.
Security is always trade-offs, but I wanted to mention that because that is a valid thing to do.
Like
that is not insecure in itself.
Bitch.
It might have different insecurities than having a password manager, but also it doesn't have certain insecurities that a password manager like LastPass has. So why are we talking about this? What happened at LastPass? Let's get into that.
The outer levels to your rage, which is higher than on the episode goes. That's actually good. That's a good theory. I'm subscribing to that. Auto rage leveling. Fucking password managers. What's that ship called in Warhammer again? Oh, I did the wrong. The unrelenting fury. That's always, if I ever own a ship, I'm gonna call it that. The wife's gonna object, but it'll be this yacht. It'll be called the like it'll have this really nice font, like flowing, like yacht, like these expensive. If I'm ever a millionaire, expensive yachts have, and it'll just like in this nice font, lovely font will say unrelenting fury. Best call sign ever.
Yes. What happened at LastPass? Let's get into that. As Astral sees commenting in Twitch chat, of course I'm broadcasting this live as I mentioned, similar to the Triton 2 post-it note on the screen. Yeah, although that's a bit sloppy, which caused a pretty significant privacy issue, which I think also we shouldn't neglect. So I kind of want to talk about that next.
All right, now we have to do another seamless edit here.
So let's talk about the privacy issues here. This is another point where I
did it again. Maybe I just really want a Big Mac. I've had a Big Mac in like months. I usually only go to McD when we're like on a road trip, and that's like, it's like the easy way to do, and you know what you're getting. Man, maybe I just really want a Big Mac.
And then on top of that, they also did another mistake, which I also want to talk about, which is basically, which caused a pretty significant privacy issue, which I think also we shouldn't neglect. So I kind of want to talk about that next. This is another point where LastPass didn't keep up with. Well, I don't know if this was about.
It's not completely seamless, but
with the types in this case, it's more like I don't understand why they didn't do this from the beginning.
That's
so one of where you can go to, and who you can use to better take care of your passwords.
I don't know. Today's not really my day in formulating thoughts, but There's these days and there's
Take
other
care of
days.
your passwords. So there are two alternatives that I've used in recent years. I want to put them on an electronic feedback email address. I'm going to tell you what that is right now. It's not leaving my brain now. The only thing I can do to get that out maybe is das ist ein belegtes Brot mit Schinken, Schinken, ein belegtes Brot mit Ei, Ei. Das sind 2 belegte Brote, eins mit Schinken und eins mit Ei. Und dazu eisgekühlter Baumolunder, Baumolunder, eisgekühlt. And that always works. Feedback email address. I'm going to tell you what that is right now. Eisgekühlter Baumolunder, Baumolunder, eisgekühlt. Und das sind 2 mit Schinken und eins mit Ei. Well, that was obviously a lie because I played a jingle before I told you. A lie? Well, that was obviously a lie because I played a jingle before. Talked about, kind of how I grew up and what my political beliefs are and how my parents raised me. That kind of, gives you a background and it gives you, I mentioned that. Because I mentioned that. So as I said, I don't do Lupus Nocte, which is some amazing synthwave. It's also important to me. So sometimes that just happens. We'll see. I will try, but I can't promise anything. Yeah. That's about it. Aim to misbehave and get off LastPass. I love how these synthwave songs fade out a lot of the time. Also makes me think of the Dr. Disrespect stream is starting. Right. View chapters. And copy and paste. So all this is mostly copy and paste. That segment was longer than I thought it would be. You never know beforehand. Here you go, okay. Publish. Copy and paste. Copy and paste. Copy and paste. Doop. Save. Publish again. Well, not really, but publish for real now. Publish. No, let the computer work. Okay. All right. This will take a little bit. This will take a bit. What are we gonna do in the meantime? Gonna make sure that this game is that I wanna play is actually boop, boop, boop. Is there? Is it installed? Yeah, I've never started this before, so I don't know if it'll run. But we can watch a trailer maybe.
so you know what you're in for here. Once I've done got the podcast done. Announcement trailer. What? First look gameplay. No, that's not what I want. That's what we're gonna do. It's already fucking YouTubers. It just came out 4 hours ago, and they already have like I don't know. Yeah, probably 8 hours ago, and they already have videos like 4 hours ago. EA release trailer. I don't think I've seen that before.
We are the scientific vanguard, the spearhead of genetic innovation.
Oh, they have German
Your
accent.
mission is to be the overseer of a deep-sea science facility, researching secret cloning technology.
Sounds like my thing.
Secure
1976.
valuable resources.
6 years before I was born. No, 7.
Expand your base to push back darkness. Harvest aquatic life forms.
I love the look of this game.
Keep your crew safe.
That's what a deep sea game
And
should
always
look like.
remember, darkness means danger. Do not turn off the light.
Oh. Oh, I like the music a lot. Yeah, so I'm really excited about that. That looks like it's right down my alley. It's also like I like the look of it, like how they made the sea look. New Paradox. How many expansions are out? Well, Paradox Arc is actually like their publishing label for indie games. So yeah, I mean, Paradox gets a lot of shit for like making a lot of money from DLCs. But I think that's like that's like two sides of a coin, like two edges of a sword, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, it means you spend a lot of money on the game over time, but I think it's a lot better than loot boxes or in-game fucking nickel and diming people. And it just they support the games, like they keep their games. Like Stellaris has just been going for like fucking ages. I don't think it's the worst model. Yeah, I mean, yeah, they managed to keep games alive, like City Skylines. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ. And it's kind of like, you can, if you don't have that money or you don't want to spend that money, there are functional games, right? The thing you're fighting is FOMO, I guess, right? Because you don't have the newest stuff, but they're like playable games. So, I think all things considered, I kind of like Paradox. Kind of like their model. I mean, I have a soft spot for Paradox. I like a lot of their games. I think I in theory like them better. I like the idea of playing them, except I'm like too stupid to actually play them. Like Stellaris or like Europa Universalis or Hearts of Iron. I have a really soft spot for Paradox because Paradox introduced me to Sabaton. I was playing Hearts of Iron and they launched that like DLC with like Sabaton music, and I knew I would never have, like, at that point I wasn't listening to metal and I wouldn't just have even though I had Spotify or whatever, but I knew the name Sabaton, and I think Dave had talked about this. I talked about this with Dave, and Dave's been going like, anyway, I bought the DLC based on, I think, Dave saying Sabaton is cool, and so that introduced like and Hearts of Iron, the Sabaton song which was in that DLC for that game for that reason, is still one of my favorite Sabaton songs. Like, it's like, especially from the lyrics and from the like the content of the song. It's really cool. Anyway, so Paradox kind of introduced me to Sabaton, so where they're actually from. Are they from Denmark? From up there somewhere. Oh, from Sweden. Oh, they're also from Sweden. That makes sense. Yeah, are they in Stockholm? Okay, interesting. Yeah, Sweden. Yeah, they're a big company these days. Like they're really. I mean, they're publishing a lot, which I see. Like, if I have a criticism of Paradox, it's like that they're one of these companies that are also getting big and they're doing all these things and they're spreading themselves thin. And I think they were a lot better when they were just focused. But, you know, they've a lot of my favorite, like, you know, isn't Harebrained Schemes, isn't like Battletech published by a Paradox? I love that game. I have so many hours in that game. And then, you know, City Skylines, obviously. Stellaris. Although I'm not good at that game, I try to play that a lot. Crusader Kings, obviously. But isn't like wasn't Pillars of Eternity also published by them? Hearts of Iron, Stellaris, Crusader Kings, City Skylines. Yeah. Pillars of Eternity, which is, you know, it's like, I don't know, can I look this up safely? What, like, my most, let me do that on I don't know what kind of information, you know. I mean, does it have my porn consumption in here? I need to check this first. Does Steam like give you, but that's only my most played Steam games. So I'm not sure that would be can you order the games by hours played? Yeah, playtime. What do we got? Yeah, Elite Dangerous, Battletech, PUBG, Pillars of Eternity. You know, there's a lot of Paramount shit in there. Fallout, Stellaris, which I played a hell of a lot. For the fact that I just fucking suck at that game. Man, oh god, I need to play Dragon Age again. I won't play that. Mass Effect. Played that much. I can't remember. I swore I barely tried Mass Effect. Played that more than Disco Elysium. That is hard to believe. Jesus Christ. Elden Ring's getting up there as well. I mean, that's only the Steam game, really. Can't play Valheim anymore because it fucking burns my my CPU to a crisp. Should put some music on or something. This is fucking boring. What am I thinking? Why are you not playing? Thank you. That's better. I'm losing hairs in my beard. That's not good. Radiation exposure? Oh, we're done. We're done. Now we just need to do the export as well. But actually, that's not that important. Right. All right. I think I'm gonna. Just put the music on. This is dumb. I think I'm gonna go to break screen for a bit, and I'm gonna have to turn the audio off for that as well. And then after that, I'm gonna come back and we're gonna play Surviving the Abyss. So bear with me here for like 10 minutes or something, and then I'll be back. I need to switch some things here behind the scenes and upload the podcast and everything, but I'll be back soon. Don't go anywhere. That was totally the wrong button. Don't go anywhere.